Alright, so today we're doing the study guides on the advanced camera operations section. So if a tripod has 3 legs, what do you call it if it only has 1 leg? Well, what if a girl only has 1 leg? You call her Eileen. Oh! Mrs. Chingas keeps hoping she'll never hear my bad jokes ever again.
We hope that too.
Oh. So we're doing the rest of the modile. I guess we sort of talked about it a little bit. Does anyone know what that's called?
Macro.
Macro, yep. You can remember it because it's like micro, like a microscope if you look at something really small but close up. So the idea with a macro photo, and you'll be doing this like in the next couple days probably, is you get something really small, let's say the lettering on this, but it fills the whole frame. So you have to figure out how to do that. I always say like an insect on a flower, you know, like a ladybug on a flower. That's a good macro photo. Okay, so M stands for macro, right?
No.
See, I always try to fool you. What does M stand for?
Manual.
What are you going to shoot in today? We're going to go for manual mode. What camera setting might you adjust to make a waterfall look smooth and surreal? The shutter speed. Remember, we kind of pretend like that's our aperture and that's the shutter. If you leave the shutter open long, then whatever's happening in motion will also be exposed for a long time, and that's why you get things that look like this. So that would be a 1/200th of a second fast shutter speed. That's a full 1/3 of a second, and so it starts to have motion blur. I have a professional photography friend that calls it schmeary looking. It's when it's schmeary. Is that a professional term? All right, how do you measure shutter speed? Inches, miles per hour. Yeah, fractions of a second. So we're suggesting 1/200th of a second is pretty fast. And I think anything over a 1/2 a second, you almost have to have a tripod for. So you just can't hold it still because the camera will shake enough, you'll get motion blur. All right, there's our pinwheel again. So again, the pinwheel's spinning the same speed, however many revolutions a second we want to say. We'll say 1,000 revolutions a second. But if I have my shutter open for a full second, that's what it looks like. And if I have my shutter open for only 1/160th of a second, that's what it looks like. You guys good at math?
No.
Fractions? Okay. So anyway, a fraction of a second, only 1/60th of a second. That's pretty fast. If you're shooting pool, same kind of story here. This is what it looks like when you break. If you've got it open for 1/5 of a second, if you've only got it open for only 1/200th of a second, then you actually see the ball still frozen in time. Now scroll down a little bit more. This is where you get to play the game. All right, we're gonna pick a fraction of a second for this one, and then I'm gonna ask you guys what might these be, just to see if you're getting the idea here. We'll pick on our studio manager, Jolene. Let's just call out a fraction of a second. You can't be wrong or right. Just whatever you want to call out that's kind of in the middle of life. I want to see if you can do it though. Just call out a number. We're going to laugh at you if you call it something silly though. Is that okay? Go ahead. Oh. No, that's actually pretty good. Oh, that's good. So Nate put up there 1/30th of a second. There's a good intern. All right. I'll do this democratically. Raise your hand if you think you can pick, for example, one of these two sides. You can even vote on which one. Okay. I almost called you Paula. Andrea. Which one do you want? That one?
That one, sure.
Okay, what might that be then?
Like 1/100th or...
There you go. She went with 1/200th in the end. I like that better. So that's a super fast shutter speed, and that's why we froze it in time. Okay, who else wants to guess this one now? All right, go ahead, Cambry.
1/5.
Like 1/5 of a second. It's a slower shutter speed. Yeah. All right, so one more time. Now we show the problem. How much light am I letting in if I go like this?
Not a lot.
Not letting in very much light. So now we have the problem. Here's where the math starts to play into it. If I've got a super fast shutter speed, my picture looks dark or underexposed. Yep. So that looks about right. But by the time, 1/60th of a second, we'll pretend like this is 1/60th of a second, and this is 1/2000th of a second. So I've got to adjust. If I want that kind of a correct exposure, I have to adjust something else. What? The aperture. So if I have my aperture stopped all the way down, and I have a fast shutter speed, I'm pretty much in trouble. You have to figure out some other things to make it work. But if I open that aperture up, now I can have a fast shutter speed because I'm opening up for more light. Exactly right. So when I open up my aperture really wide, I've got a shallow depth of field. So if, for example, you can't really tell. In fact, the other thing is, did you notice what the sky looks like? It's blown out. So that's another problem. So when photographers are talking about shooting in daylight, do they like a blistering sun? It's actually not the best. A completely bright blue sky at noon with the full sun is actually usually not the best, depending on what you're doing. Most photographers like a little bit of clouds in the sky to kind of filter out the sun a little bit. Or what's the best time of day to shoot?
Golden hour.
You heard it. She already knew it, the golden hour.
Which is
Yeah, what is it?
when the
It's
sun
like,
So sunset and
in the winter,
sunrise.
it'd be like
They almost always refer to it as being sunset though. All right, going on. So now I'm gonna ask you guys the same thing. Raise your hand, someone that hasn't chosen yet. What is an example of a fast shutter speed? Can't be wrong, really. Well, yeah, you could be wrong. Someone wanna raise their hands? No? I'll call on you then. No, you can't. Jared, that's what you get for sitting on the front row. Give me an example of a fast shutter speed. Yep, 1/200th and beyond. Okay, would be a fast shutter speed. And Jana, give me a slow shutter speed. Like a half a second. Good. Or 2 seconds. Oh, by the way, if it says inches, is it inches? Or is that how we say seconds? Because we don't have any other way to do that. It's really not true. We could put an S. When I'm doing stuff in video, I always call it like 30 seconds, like a 30-second commercial, put an S. But anyway, you got the idea. Okay, it's starting to come together. When shooting with a slow shutter speed, you have to be careful to avoid. The second word is shake. First word's chocolate. No.
chocolate shake,
What do you think the first word is?
camera.
Camera. Very good. So they call it camera shake, and that's why I'm saying anything like a half a second or more, it's pretty hard. You are human beings, you are organic. Even if you're just pushing the shutter button down, you're gonna move the camera a little bit. So you almost always have to have a remote trigger, a tripod, or 2 really good elbows.
Too really good.
Yeah.
Nate, what do you do?
What is DOF?
depth of field.
Is he having fun?
Depth of
You
field.
having fun?
Been having fun this whole time.
And how do I control my depth of field again?
The aperture.
Right, how wide my aperture is. That's what you're gonna experiment today. So now I say, what is an example of an f-stop setting? Oh, I keep forgetting. If you need me to write these up, he could write them up. I keep forgetting, especially second language students.
F.28. I mean F2.8.
Yep, no, 2.8 was right, yeah. So that would be about as shallow as we can get. In fact, we can't even get to that with our cameras.
12.
You have to have a nice fast lens.
F1.8. I didn't know that's possible.
Have you got that on, can you do that with your lens?
No, you have to get like a fisheye lens to get that.
But we can get down to like 3.5. So actually make it something we can do. Oh, as a matter of fact, just scroll down.
Okay.
So those are the opening sizes, and they measure them in f-stops. And it's, again, this is a strange thing. If you can get this, and now we're into it 2 weeks, you should be starting to get it. It's the opposite of what you would think. So the bigger the number, the smaller the opening. All right. So 22 is a bigger number, whatever. But it's actually a smaller opening.
The bigger.
I mean, I'm a
So you can get to a 3.5. All right, now, this is where I try to trick you.
Oh,
This will be one of your next shots too. You're gonna do this very one. Mrs. Chinga still has her Superman ribbon right there. We're gonna do this very shot.
Oh, okay.
So we have the flag over there. We put the Superman ribbon right about here. You're standing about here. Which one of these was shot at f3.5? Who
It's
thinks it's the foreground one? Who thinks it's the background one? Robbie, this is where I expect you to use your smart mouth.
Wait, 3.5?
what's smart mouth.
He threw it
You
in
know?
my head. It's not working.
But I'm not gonna say anything.
Hint, hint.
Yeah, it's the foreground.
Okay, cool.
They both are.
Pardon.
They're both
Yeah,
3.5.
Hey, I wasn't wrong when I said it was that one.
Because that's a shallow depth of field, and that's a shallow, it's just where you put it. So on one shot, you're gonna have the shallow depth of field right here. Then you're gonna adjust your zoom, in your focus, and you're gonna move it over here.
Dope.
Is that so cool or what?
So
That's when you know you're professional.
professional.
And so you will be taking that shot, trying to make that happen. So in both cases, it's a shallow depth of field. It's just we did the subject here, and then we moved that shallow depth of field and moved it there. And of course, you can have all of the above. You can have the foreground and the background out of focus and have the subject somewhere in the middle, which is very, very common. Okay, how do you manipulate your camera to make everything in focus from near to far? So if I had f3.5 on this, if I want everything in focus, what do I do? Give me a number.
Oh, 22.
You're getting it. You're getting it. So it's screwy, but you stop it down to like f22, and now everything is in focus. Okay. Is it starting to make sense? I can see you're working hard. Your little brains are kind of burning up inside you there. I'm smelling smoke. Give an example of a camera setting that would require using a tripod. No, it has nothing to do with aperture.
Oh,
It requires
slow,
using a
the
tripod.
slow
Why?
one,
Because I've got a slow shutter speed. Did I say it? Okay, so how do you manipulate your camera to make everything in focus from near to far? Aperture, stop down, something like f22, f25. Okay, so you're controlling your aperture to decide what's in focus, and then to control whether you have motion blur or not, you control your shutter speed. And both of them control the light coming into the camera.
Wow.
This is just too much work. Who thought you were just going to take pretty photos and not have to learn any math in this class? Wrong.
That's what I think about everything.
Adjust this to brighten an image. Okay, so now you're learning the last step on manual mode. It says adjust this to brighten your image after you've set your aperture and shutter speed. Okay, so you're all going to do this, but I'll just do it right now because I'm videotaping this thing. You have your three settings right here. You remember this? What does this lever do? If I switch that, I go back to looking through the lens of what I'm going to shoot, switch it back, get back to the settings.
Ow.
Okay, we have the shutter speed, the aperture, and now the new one. Anyone know it?
ISO.
ISO it is. So that's ISO. I'm going to first open my aperture as wide as it'll go. There we go. We got 3.5. Okay. And now my shutter speed.
Sounds like that. I don't want that.
We're saying that that's a little underexposed.
Oh,
But
okay.
I've got a slow shutter speed.
I can't breathe.
In fact, I got it so slow.
You're so funny.
All right, let's.
She's blushing this time. All right.
She just touched my elbow.
I know. You know, I'll never think about elbows the same from now on. Things you learn in high school. Remember that photography class when we didn't learn a thing except for elbows?
Don't you love how this
All
is
right,
all being
so I
recorded
got
too?
so slow of a shutter speed that I've got motion blur. I got camera shake. But, okay. And so I've got as much light as I can have coming into the camera, so now what do?
You put it in Photoshop and fix it.
You fix it in Photoshop. You can actually, if it's not too underexposed. In fact, I'm going to teach you that one right now. This is a little thing that I throw out that's not on the state test. Would you rather have your photo a little overexposed or a little underexposed?
Little under.
Little under.
Little under, because in Photoshop you can fix it 10, 15, 20%. But if the data's not there, like that sky that was blown out,
You
that's
can't-
just gone.
You can't fix blown out.
You can't do it. You can't bring back data that isn't there.
Yes,
You can
if
color
it's-
it in blue.
Yeah, you can't edit light.
Yeah, exactly. If there's no data because it's just blown out, there's nothing there. There's no color, there's no definition, there's no nothing. But if it's a little dark, in fact, most people tend to shoot just a little dark and then they fix it in Photoshop or Lightroom. Yeah. All right, if I want to wake up my camera, can I just barely touch the shutter release button? Yes, I can.
What?
This is your last, if you want to wake up your camera,
Oh.
just barely touch the shutter release button and it wakes it up. You guys should all have a cowboy trigger finger. You just automatically know that you're kind of keeping your index finger there because you wake up your camera, you can measure the light before you take the photo. Exactly. Okay, so this last one is ISO. On these cameras, you hold the function button down to adjust the ISO. You guys are going to practice this today. ISO is kind of like, it's artificially brightening your image. Let's just keep it simple. Okay, so I can adjust my ISO. You guys all paying attention to this? And now I'm going to change my ISO to something like 1000.
Are you just using that turn dial up there?
Yes, so in all cases I use this dial, but in this case I have to hit the function button first and then turn it. And adjusting the aperture, I have to hit this button, the plus minus button, and turn the wheel.
Where's the
You guys are all going to practice this. I'm going to give you the cameras, you're going to practice this. But let's see how my photo turned out. Yep, now it's much better exposed. When you adjust your ISO, you're also making it grainier, so that's why it's the last thing you do. Which picture's grainy?
The
last
bottom one.
Right. So how did I get that grainy look?
You adjusted your
You do
ISO.
the
Robbie was
grainy
paying
films
attention.
filter on
The ISO setting when it's not doing anything is set to 100, and then it goes up. The more you increase the ISO, the grainier it looks.
Would you ever want your photo to look grainy?
Nope. Well,
Yes,
that's not
if you're
true.
going,
When,
if you're going
Sometimes
for a
it-
comic book filter, you know.
if you want it to look like an old something, an
Sometimes
old
it looks really
antique
aesthetic.
or yeah, right. Or maybe
That just looks like the comic
maybe
book
the
filters.
pioneers crossing the plains and you get a shot so it looks a little bit grainy, so it looks like an old newspaper photo or something.
And then you can say that you found it among
Yeah.
old newspaper
Yeah.
clippings
And then
and,
they'll be
make
like,
a ton of
no,
money.
no, you didn't.
Name the three
That's
pillars of
me.
photography. You know them now.
Agriculture.
Agriculture.
Shutter speed.
Aperture, shutter speed, ISO.
Agriculture.
Okay, they're all up here on the board, aren't they?
That was so cute.
Actually, aperture's not. Who remembers how to spell aperture?
A-P-E-R.
APERTURE.
Agrabat.
Lavina thinks you're serious.
Oh, sorry.
Lavina, he's teasing you.
You're a horrible person, Nate. How could you take
I
advantage
don't
of
know.
them like that?
I apologize.
Okay, so once you can master those three pillars of photography, you're like halfway through knowing everything you need to know about running a camera. Then it's just learning the tricks and trades of your
That's
own
only
camera. so-
halfway.
Well, I mean, it's
Wait,
the
the
math.
last one,
It's
I
the
don't
math
know.
you have to know.
Oh, ISO.
So that's how,
I'm not
with
doing
an R,
any math.
aperture.
Okay, good.
Aperture, shutter speed, ISO. Now the thing of it is they all have to balance together to get the right exposure. If I'm shooting bats coming flying out of a cave at night, what is the new setting I just taught you that I probably have to adjust?
ISO.
And your name is Kristen?
Yeah.
Yep. So I'm going to have to increase the ISO. And what's going to happen to my picture?
It's gonna get grainy.
It's going to get grainy or noisy. There's nothing I can do about it. It's the only way I can
old
get.
looking bad.
I say it's the only way I can get that shot. What's the other obvious thing I could do
Aperture.
physically?
Physically,
Light
shine a
it.
light at them.
Exactly. Put a light on it. So don't accept it as being grainy. Figure out how to light it. We're going to touch on this really briefly.
Ranking system.
So we're saying right here. Okay, got to pay attention.
Sorry.
We got to get shooting today. Robbie's bored. We're saying right here that we leave the shutter speed the same,
What?
and we're saying right here we leave the f-stop the same.
I mean,
But, excuse me, if I adjust either of these, then they've all got to change. So, if I change my f-stop, then I've got to change my ISO. I want the shutter to be fairly fast. Click, click. But I change what's in focus. Okay, so if I change it so everything's in focus and I have a fast shutter speed, then I have to increase the ISO. It's also called gain. Now in this one, I want the focus to be exactly what I've decided. But now I'm changing my shutter speed, and again, because I'm letting in less light, I have to increase my ISO.
That is so complicated.
You're starting to get it though. I don't expect you to understand everything right now. Moving on. So again, it says the same thing. I'm making you hear it one more time. If you want everything in focus in landscape mode, would you get back up there? You went too fast.
Look at the
What?
tree in
It
the
was
back.
the next one.
Landscape mode, if you want to get a quick photo with everything in focus. Do you know the answer? You do. Okay, now, what is an LS?
Light
Abbreviate.
speed.
Light speed, long shot.
Wait, oh, I was like, wait, really?
So a long shot means that you're standing a little ways away from the subject and you get the whole subject and maybe even then some in the frame.
Look at the tree.
That is a funny looking
I tried to
tree.
give the girls some eye candy to look at.
Thank you.
I think I got one shot for the boys though.
Yeah.
What?
Wonder Woman.
Wonder
I can't
Woman
even
is
say that anymore.
freaking
I'm not even gonna say that anymore. That's the last time you heard me say that. Who's seen this movie?
I have part of it.
Okay, wide shot means everything, every subject is in the frame. So, it's not just Forrest
Wait,
Gump. I don't know what her name of the character is.
Is it just called Forrest
Wait,
Gump?
what's the movie?
It is Forrest Gump.
Forrest Gump.
For some reason I was
I've
thinking
never
You
I
gotta
had
see
it.
that one. That one's a classic. And
Wow.
FS,
What
A
a cool
full
little
shot.
Legend.
Is that a full shot? A full
Well,
shot
it's
is
a
head to
shadow.
toe.
You got all your shadow in there.
Tire tracks.
It is. Even though she's on her knee there, it is a full shot because it's the whole subject head to toe. That's how you know.
Oh.
And by the way, you should write some of that stuff in so you know what we're talking about, because you guys don't have these photos, right? So full shot means head to toe, wide shot means all the subjects are in the frame. Long
Medium.
shot means you're shooting from a little bit of a distance. It doesn't have to be a lot of a distance. Long shot makes it sound like it's, from here to the moon. Okay, what's a CU?
Medium.
CU, wait, whoa. What's an M? What's an M shot?
Medium.
Medium shot. So medium shot is also sometimes called a portrait shot, a bust. Anyway, so it's basically waist up or whatever. And if you're filming old men, do them a favor and go above the belly. We don't want to see our belly. There's Katniss. All right.
Chest up.
Who can name all the Chris's that are
Chris
hunts?
Hemsworth, Chris Evans, Chris Pine, and Chris Pratt.
You got it.
Yeah.
Very good. All right,
Chris.
so that's an example of a what? What's a CU?
Chris,
up.
Chris
Close
Pratt.
up. A Chris up. Okay, scrolling on. Is there one more?
Yeah.
What
John
is it?
Wayne.
An extreme
close-up.
close-up.
It's John Wayne.
Seems like you would be a handsome man.
Okay, someone besides you, and you almost got it.
John Wayne.
If you can guess that actor, you get a candy.
John Wayne.
I don't know what the name is.
Literally, it's up on the screen.
It's John Wayne.
Oh, is it up on the screen?
I
Nate
said
just
John
wrote
Wayne
it.
3 times, and
It's
then he didn't.
John
I
Wayne.
literally
If-
said that.
If John Wayne looks like Clint Eastwood.
Extreme close up.
It's Clint Eastwood's the famous Clint Eastwood scowl.